Good day, my friends. I am here to provide another record review. Today, I am going to discuss my feelings for the Posies' debut album, Failure. First of all, I want to give you a little bit of history about the Posies and my feelings for them. I first discovered the Posies, I believe, I was in high school, maybe my junior year or senior year. I was listening to a lot of college radio to discover newer artists. Some of those artists I discovered, I remember hearing the Stone Roses for the very first time on college radio, Teenage Fan Club, and a lot of other artists that I absolutely adore. And so, college radio, in and of itself, really propelled my interest and knowledge of what was happening in the world pre-internet days as far as indie music and what was on the scene. And I know that I first heard the Posies sometime, I don't remember exactly when, but I first heard them on college radio, and it was the song Suddenly Mary off of Dear 23. And I fell in love with that song. I still think it's a classic, timeless song. It's a classic Posey song. I don't necessarily think that it's a song that defines the Posey sound, but any Posies fan will recognize that being one of the pinnacle songs that they've ever done. The Posies have always had a unique writing style. They're very serious in the way that they craft songs, and they're very pronounced. They're gifted with two great songwriters, John Auer and Ken Stringfellow, who also have solo albums themselves, which are everything I've heard has been great. I do prefer the Posies together than two together, working together. The chemistry is so good between them two, and their voices work very well together. I think Ken Stringfellow's voice is more easily recognizable, and without him in the band, I just don't think the Posies would be who they are. Not taking away from John or anything, but I think he's more critical to the development and role of the Posies and their longevity that they've had. So let's get back to the point. I'm going to talk about the Posies' debut record, Failure. This record was released originally in 1988 on Pop Llama Records. This is a reissue in 2014 by Omnivore Recordings. The inside, the insert, you get this old show flyer from back in the day. It's like $4 to get in. And then you get the lyrics to the song. The vinyl itself is a translucent green. It's really cool. The record plays very well. The quality of the recording is great. I'm not sure if there's been much enhancement by Omnivore or if it's just a re-release. Maybe it's the first time on vinyl. I really don't know. I'll be honest with you. I think when I was in high school, I first got Dear 23 on cassette. That's mainly my first. When I was a kid, I ordered records, like vinyl records, through like BMG, and I had a few records. But when I really started getting serious in high school, it was more cassettes. Early on it was hip hop, and then I sort of morphed into more indie and alternative, and whatever the record stores would have at that time, 91, 92, 93. And I first got Posey's Dear 23 on cassette, and it was Geffen. And at that time, the label spoke a lot to me. I knew Geffen was like quality. They put out records by Sloan, and they also had these samplers. If you ever heard of DGC Rarities Volume 1, fantastic. And introduced me to a lot of other artists. And Sonic Youth, that's another great band that was on Geffen. So when you see Geffen, you know it's going to be good, more than likely. Definitely in the alternative indie side of things. So I got Dear 23, played it to death, love it all the way through. I'm not going to say it's like my favorite album. I wouldn't necessarily call it classic definition power pop, but it's definitely a pop record with power pop elements. If you're going to put it in a category, I definitely would lean towards power pop. So back to, and then I discovered what I think is their best record, Frosty on the Beat, are just so jangly and happy and upbeat. It just puts that perfect mood in you. And then I got Amazing Disgrace. And after that, I don't like, I know I've heard some of their albums, and that's when I think they started veering off into solo projects. I don't really have strong impressions of the Posies following Amazing Disgrace. But those three records are the pinnacle of the Posey sound, in my opinion. Dear 23, uh, Frosty on the Beater, and Amazing Disgrace. Now, for a long time, like, I love the Posies, but I really didn't, like, dig in real deep. I didn't even know this existed. I thought Dear 23 was their first effort. I never saw this in record stores. I didn't know much about it. And finally, just from being into music like all the time 24/7, I learned about this release. I didn't know anything about it, never heard any of the songs. And so when I bought this record a couple or 3 years ago, I had never even heard any of it. But I knew it, as a hardcore Posies fan, it was something that I needed to have in my collection. So I went ahead and bought it. I think it was at a pretty decent price at that time, and I got it. And I was surprised. Honestly, my first impression when I listened to it was that it didn't have quite the mature development that you hear, or the confidence and signature stamp that you heard right away on Dear 23. I'm not saying that in a negative sense. I just didn't make that connection. For me, it's more of a springboard record. You hear immediately the ingredients that make up what the classic Posies sound came to be. I just don't think it was maybe all tied together at that time. I think they were still forming their identity. And what I learned was that the record was sort of DIY produced. I guess these guys are like really young, like teenagers maybe. And it was formulated and conceptualized, produced in John's parents' home, I believe, on maybe an 8-track studio recording. I don't know that for certain. I don't know for sure about the production of the record. It's I guess this doesn't really imply that. Well, anyway, I think the album, to me, I think I would have a stronger reaction to it if I'd not already been familiar with the following three albums. So I think it's impossible to reflect on this album without knowing how great the Posies were to be. So if anything, that sort of clouds my judgment, maybe. I think that the album definitely would not immediately... It has power pop elements, but I would not say it's a power pop record. I hear a lot of influences. I hear Beatles, the Hollies, any of those harmony-driven bands from that era. Definitely the Posies were heading in that direction. I don't think they knew their capabilities yet. I do think that the songwriting is excellent throughout. My favorite tracks is track 2, The Longest Line. I think is one of the best tracks on the album. I like Me Too. Paint Me, the first song on side 2, is excellent, grabs your attention right away. And At Least for Now those are my 4 favorite tracks. I do think that you hear, at least sometimes when I hear the recordings, even though they're different in the way that they songwrite and the way they look for certain, but sometimes when on the recordings, I can get mixed up on whether it's John or Ken. But I feel that this is more Ken in this album. I could be wrong, but that's just my impression. I don't know who wrote the songs, everything, but I just feel a stronger Ken influence on this record. Overall, it's great. I think it aligns and parallels a lot of what I call college rock that was out at that time. REM, the Connells. It's sort of maybe even like a Restless Records artist, or like Big Dipper. Or there was some of those artists out that time that were jangly, but not necessarily like core power pop bands. And this record, while it's not exactly like that, I think it can relate to those styles of music. I think it's a tough record to box in. I don't really know what sort of genre. It definitely has pop leanings, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily power pop. For me, I would give it probably a 7 out of 10. Now, I'm not going to reveal what those later Posies albums I would give, but definitely higher scores than this. I think it's a great effort. It's a it's a springboard album and showing off the ingredients of what was to make the Posies great in their next 3 albums. If you are not a Posies fan or don't know that much about the Posies, I personally wouldn't recommend this album to start with. I would recommend Dear 23 or Frosting on the Beater. If you are a Posies fan and love that Posies sound, I definitely would recommend this as being a must-have. It's very enjoyable. It's kind of I think the tracking of the albums have done very well. The tracks that I mentioned that are my favorites is like track 2, track 4, 7, and like 10. So they spread it out well. Overall, it's a really nice listen, very easy listen. It's produced well. The vocals come through. The mix is done well. So yeah, I really enjoy this album. I love the Posies. Failure for me gets a 7 out of 10, and I hope you enjoy this video. Have a great day.